Good afternoon, everyone. I'll now call the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee meeting to order. This meeting's being held in person and electronically in accordance with the Municipal Act. Consent items. For the consent items, I'll read out the title associated with the recommended motions printed on the agenda to see if members of committee would like to deal with them on consent or hold them for discussion. For items that are not held, they'll be deemed approved on consent with no further discussion on the matter. These items will be moved forward to general committee meeting scheduled for February 28th, 2024 for consideration. So we have no public meetings, open delegations or presentations. There's no standing items or committee updates. So we start off with a few deferred items. There's 3 deferred items from the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee meeting that was held on January 31st, 2024. The first one is the Heritage Property Tax Relief Program.
Hold, please.
And that's held by Mayor Nuttall. And the second one is 5.2, public consultation, firework restrictions in residential areas.
Hold, please.
And that's held by Councillor Kungle. The third item is 5.3, support for nonprofit environmental groups, and that's held by Mayor Nuttall. There's no report or advisory committees, no reports of officers to the corporation, and we do have a few items for discussion. One item, I should say, one item for discussion, which is 8.1, Saddle and Arena expansion.
Hold, please.
And that's held by Mayor Nuttall. And I guess we have actually one more item, which is down on number 9, which is community project submissions. There's one community project submission to be discussed by Councillor Nixon regarding the Unity Cleanup Group. And I guess we will hold that until, or I guess, no, we can go forward with that and then we'll deal with the other matters after, okay? Yeah. Oh, okay. Or we can put this one on consent too. Okay, great. It passes on consent. So let's back up to the first item that was held, and that was held by Mayor Nuttall, I believe, the Heritage Property Tax Relief Program.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate the item coming forward. With regards to, I guess, my thinking around this, you know, I think that the city has some real opportunity on heritage buildings. And I think that there's some great opportunities that are lying in front of us on that front, which will take a lot of capital. And at the same time, when I look at I didn't put the item on the floor. I'll put the item on the floor. And so as I look at the opportunities for the Heritage Committee and for heritage as a whole in the City of Barrie going forward, I look at it as public benefit, public good, public space. And this is looking at it as public benefit, public good, but private space. And we only have so many dollars in the system. And I think the dollars that we do set aside for heritage should be public space dollars. And so I held this, I put it on the floor, but I won't be supporting it. I do wish there was enough dollars to go around to do this and everything else. I just don't feel like it's a priority against funding for housing for those in the community that don't have it, and the dollars that we do want to invest in heritage to be invested in public space versus anything else. So I'll leave it there, and I know that the mover, or I'm the mover, but the writer of the item for discussion is here as well, and I'll leave it with you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Is there any other members of committee that have any comments? Councillor Congo.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. So I do sit on the Heritage Committee, and while I fully appreciate Mayor Nettles' perspective on that, do support what Councillor Rietma has brought forward as a chair of that committee, reflecting their interests. And I think it's an interesting time around also bridging how we look at heritage, because while it is about private stock, private heritage, that is a significant aspect of where we do look at tourism and private homes that are on tour in the heritage aspect. And I think of heritage broadly around segments. So natural heritage and what we're doing to try and support that public heritage and public spaces, but also the private stock and private homes have historically always been something that we've tried as a program to encourage people to register. And so while there's always going to be competing interests and limited resources, I respect where the committee has come to look at, while that program has changed through changes to legislation, really still trying to encourage residents that have these beautiful homes to formally register them, because the listing, I believe, is no longer in existence. And so I do support it. And to that, I guess I'll ask one question of Chair or Councillor Rietma, who chairs that Heritage Committee, if there's anything you wanted to have this committee further consider based on the conversations at Heritage Committee about why this has come forward.
Councillor Rietma.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. Yeah, I think this is a really important little item, and I say little. The initial review by staff is that it's around the $50,000 mark, and it might go up to 100. But just a bit of background on it. I think that, you know, even though a building may be owned privately, it still forms part of the public space, if you will, if you're walking along the street, or it provides part of the neighborhood ambiance or a part of the character of our city. And I think that we spend very little money on the character of our city, and heritage is certainly very much part of that. And the purpose of this recommendation is that let's ask staff to have a look at it and bring it back in time for our next budget. We can then make that decision. And there's a series of options that staff can recommend to us. The Heritage Act says you can provide tax relief, if you will, between 10 and 40%. So maybe staff will come back and say it's 10% or whatever. The other thing is you can attach conditions to it. So you can have someone, you know, that needs to or has spent the money on upgrading their house in terms of the heritage aspects of it, that they can provide, you know, the receipts, and you can use that as a basis for your tax refund. So I think there's a series of different ways that we could implement something like this. And I must say there are a lot of other municipalities that do exactly that. You know, municipalities even in our area, Springwater, Innisfil, Collingwood, Penetanguishene, Midland, and they all have slightly different rules because the Heritage Act does permit us to have rules that are tapered and tailored to our own situation. So I would encourage this committee to support this and support it to the extent that we ask our staff to have a good hard look at it and bring back a recommendation so that we can really have a good hard look at it and make a decision.
Any follow-up to that, Councillor Congo? Oh, great. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. So I will not be supporting this, and understanding the importance of heritage. I actually think that the optics of this at this time is not appropriate. We're in a housing crunch for affordability, and I just think taking any money, you know, we talk about the affordability of homes and stuff, and we seem to be always putting money in other things. You know, we take money from the CIP to heritage, and to do a tax relief, you know, if there was any way, we call it bonusing in a new build, but I will not be supporting it and understanding the importance of it. But I can't see taking big expensive homes, paying a tax relief to renovate them at privately owned structures.
Great, thank you. Is there any members of non-committee that have anything? Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. I wouldn't support this on this committee, and here's why. And I'm really trying to focus on an objectiveness. Let's think of a scenario where somebody has a home that could be heritage that just needs a little bit of love. If the homeowner believes that and respects heritage and aspires to get it to a point where it's beautified, restored, if they own it, and for some reason they themselves can't afford it, either cash, home equity line of credit, whatever, if they just don't have the means, then it's okay. They continue living in their house. They continue going about their lives. Maybe they save, maybe, you know, they move forward. So that home continues to be a potential home to restore. We're not losing that home. Now, if there is a home on the market that is already for sale, so think of it as the mindset of the buyer, and you want to restore a home, if you're already going to buy the home and you know it needs a little bit of work, that is a person who likely at that time can see if they can qualify for lending that allows for renos, which that is structured, and that is a person well equipped. And if they don't want to do the renos, then they don't buy the home. If they want to purposely, and there's been articles in the media of families who purposely bought homes that needed a little bit of love and did a great job with it, at least in the last 2 years. I think there was one family on Burton that went out of the way. So there's no scenario we're not supporting this results in losing homes that potentially could be heritage and somehow losing them. And this is the other thing I'll say. I have a lot to say on this, but I'll just keep it simple. I cannot ever, not just at this time, ever justify this for these reasons. How can I tell the senior, and I wrote this while sitting here, who owns a home but is cash poor and can't afford to do, not aesthetic renos, but afford to do functional renos, HVAC, wiring, because maybe their wiring is aluminum or other things that are not to code. How can I justify to them and say, we gave a tax break to someone else, but not you? The other, because there's currently no program for senior tax benefits for the purposes of doing renos. Thanks. The other one is average families. Average families that have had their taxes go up by amounts and larger amounts in the last couple of years. I somehow have to justify this to them that while we increased their taxes, there was a specific subset in our population who we gave a tax subsidy, a break, whatever the technical language is, and specifically for the purposes that they live in what could be a heritage home. And a lot of it is aesthetic. So those would be extremely difficult questions to answer. I respect well-built homes and character. I purposely live in an older end of town for a reason. And I just don't think this is a good use of public money.
Great, thank you. Councillor Congle.
Thank you for just the sake of clarity, because we have been promoting that we do have an existing program for seniors where they have a full tax relief that does exist. So just wanting to make sure that is a public awareness that seniors can apply to the city for full tax relief. And then that could be repaid to the city based on either the sale of your house or through an estate matter.
Great, thank you. Mayor Nuttall.
Through yourself to Mr. Miller, the program for seniors, as I understand it, is not tax relief. It's I won't call it tax avoidance, but it's tax deferral. Thank you. Is that correct?
Through you, Chairman Harvey, that is correct. That program does exist where it's deferred to late incremental increases are deferred to later on to sales. I believe it is an annual application process. that does exist for seniors.
So these are not the same things. They're completely different. One is saying, I'm gonna pay my taxes, but I'm gonna pay it down the road so that I can stay in my home. And the other one is saying, we're going to make it so you pay less tax overall and you never have to pay it again. So they're just not the same, but I actually have a question to the members of the committee, because it was interesting. One of the things that, Councilor Rittman brought up, is there a lineup, or are there prospects, or is there an understood return on investment that's going to take place based on the program, in the sense that, do we have a bunch of people saying, I'm going to go and register my property for, to be on a registry and hold it forever, essentially, if I receive $1,000 or $500 off my taxes a year? Like, do we know what the opportunities are, where they are, how many there are? Any of that information?
Councilor Rittman.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. I don't think we've done that work at this point. But the committee definitely feels that, there would be people who have a heritage house who would register it, or get it designated as the proper term. And they would do that much more willingly if they could see that there was some sort of tax break for them. You have to remember that just because people live in a heritage home doesn't mean that they're rich. And secondly, it also, a heritage home does require, more maintenance than a brand new house. So this would be, and this is a program that the province has put in that allows some recognition of the added expense of owning a heritage home. And I think that's a reasonable thing to do, and it supports people that do own those, and encourages them to actually get them designated. How many there are people out there that say, "Oh, I'll do it if I get $500." I don't know, but I think it's a program that, is used in other municipalities, and it seems to be having a fair bit of support.
Yeah, thank you.
Deputy Mayor, I see that your hand was up, but now it's off the screen. Did you have anything that you would like to add?
Thanks, Chair Harvey. Actually, the mayor had clarified that it was just the increase of the year that was deferred, and it was an every year application. At the end, you would need to pay it all back, but it was clarified. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Oh, actually, Councilor Morales, I was just about to say I don't see any further hands, but
Don't worry.
go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. I just want to clarify a couple of things. We'll start with the tax. Are there people out there? And all we can do, including myself, is speculate. Here's just a question I'll say out loud. If anyone has done a kitchen reno or knows someone who's done a kitchen reno, is $500, $600? Again, the number might vary. Is that a make it or break it amount? Usually kitchen renos, for example, are into the thousands. I'm not saying every kitchen reno is $50,000, but they're definitely 10,000 and up. So the kind of person that is either going to do this or not, this might not actually move the needle. This will just be a thank you very much. This was just kind of a coupon that that they're going to put into their numbers, a discount, which is that. And the other point I want to say is, because Councillor Kungl spoke after me on this issue, I want to clarify. I very specifically wrote down the words I said. I didn't say there was no program for seniors. I said there was no program for seniors targeted at renos. And so that for anybody watching this, I just wanted to absolutely be clear. And then, which actually led me to a point to expand on the mayor that he asked. We already have a property tax deferral application process for seniors, but the criteria is so limited, because I used to put this in my newsletter years ago, and I was very enthusiastic, and I misunderstood the program. My residents would tell me, we went to the link and it wasn't what you said it was. Here's right off the City of Barrie website. The property tax deferral program is available to property owners age 65 or older, or any individual who's currently receiving benefits under ODSP, Ontario Disability Support Program, for seniors. So seniors are only eligible for the tax deferral if they are 65 and above, and or individuals who are on ODSP who are homeowners. So this is, I just want to clarify the facts about this point. This is a very different reality, and in my personal opinion, should not be used as justification for introducing similar programs under the guise that they're even remotely the same.
Great, thank you. Councillor Corser.
I am apologizing for being late to the game, and I thank you for allowing me to jump into the conversation, and I hope I'm not repeating anything that's already been said. Chair Harvey, I would like to ask actually, Miss Banfield, if what are the restrictions on owning to register a heritage property? Like you can't change certain things on the property. You have to upkeep things to the level they were historically, correct?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Corser, absolutely, there are some elements of trying to keep any sort of renovations to the to as close as possible to the existing structure, whether it be through materials or craftsmanship.
So would you say that in maybe some circumstances, there would be an added burden to owning a heritage home and registering it if you have to make those kind of accommodations if it's registered heritage home?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Corser, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a burden. I think people that, as Councillor Reba said, people that own a heritage home do so for many, many reasons, and I think they take that responsibility with a lot of pride. But perhaps is it a bit more complicated than just changing out windows is in probably different construction for sure.
And if I could follow up to that, so I know that I'm not sure if these questions have already been asked, and I apologize if they have. So when somebody buys a very, very old home, a historical home, and I understand the love of it. I always said that if I wasn't a sailor, I'd have a heritage home because I really couldn't, the time, the money, the effort that must go into doing that. It's a constant passion. You have to have that passion. But what concerns me is we're losing a lot of historical homes because there is an added responsibility of having a heritage property, and there's a stigma to it. So I've heard this multiple times, and my ward has a lot of old homes as the old Sunnydale area. And when I talk to people knocking on these beautiful old homes, I was like, oh, is this a heritage home? And they said, no, because there's the stigma to you cannot change, you cannot do, you cannot, there's restrictions on it, which keeps it to the historical value of the home, I suppose. And I find that disappointing because if it's not protected, then we can lose them. And so I thought that I thought that this was actually a really good idea because other municipalities, it's not unheard of to have this relief program, and it also protects our history and our heritage as well. So I thought this was I was kind of surprised to find out we didn't have this already, but when I saw it come up, I thought, well, I would definitely support this, and that was all I just wanted to say to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. Yes, first of all, I just want to commend councillors to my left and my right for the passion that they have to heritage property and preserving, and I think it's great. In Ward 2, we've got more than our share of beautiful old homes. I spent an hour this afternoon with a couple that had some concerns about something else and spent an hour in their kitchen, and this is a 150-year-old home. They have spent a fortune getting it fixed and upgraded and rebuilding a lot of things and a lot of time, as well as many other places that I've been to, and I've seen the same result. And I honestly believe that these people do this for a reason, and that reason is exactly what Councillor Corser mentioned, that they do it because the love and the passion they have for these old historic homes, simple as that. I don't think, you know, they don't do it for the tax relief because obviously there isn't at this point, but my question is, what brought it on? Is this something that people who, was there a group of people that have heritage homes? Is this something they're looking for? Is this something that's been brought to the Heritage Committee to bring here, or just curious?
Did you want that to go to the mover of the motion then?
I will, yes.
The answer is that no, it wasn't brought by, you know, some specific people coming to Heritage Committee saying, gee, we'd really like this. At the same time, it is, the Heritage Committee has a booth out at the farmers market, and at Open Air Dunlop. And so these discussions happen, you know, with the general public on Saturdays when they do that. And this question is raised. And for exactly the same reasons as what Councillor Corser just raised, is that, yeah, you know, people buy these houses, people upgrade these houses, and they do it for love, not for anything else. And yeah, it can be a burden, I mean, for some people. And so this just encourages heritage protection. And I think what it does too is it kind of says that the city stands behind this and encourages it. And I think, you know, we have a lot of
order, Chair.
heritage things.
Point of order, Chair. The question that was asked was, how did this come from? Not to qualify the point.
Yeah, please stick to the
Okay,
question.
sorry,
If you don't mind, Councillor Reitman. Oh, actually, hang on. Actually, that's right too. You're not member of committee, so unfortunately you can't call
We'll
point of order.
retract the point of order, even though you agreed with it.
But yes, if you could kind of stick to what the question was, Councillor Reitman, be
Sorry,
appreciated. Thank you.
I got run away there. So I hope I gave you an answer there.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, I agree that people do it because they love the property. They know it's going to cost money to bring it up to, you know, its former glory and to keep it that way. On the other side of the coin, by doing so, the value of their property is going up. And I will always support anything that where people can come and ask and give you a reason, and if someone, you know, is asking for it and is looking for some relief, I think it's yeah, I think it's something we certainly need to consider. But I do have a bit of an issue providing tax relief to people who may, you know, who may not be looking for it or haven't asked for it. So that's kind of where I stand on it. So at this point, I don't think I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. I see Councillor Kungle with your hand up again, and then Deputy Mayor Nuttall. And then I think we should probably be calling the vote because we've already spent 32 minutes talking about this. Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. I guess the question is for Ms. Banfield, unless it's better directed to someone else. So while just in case we're getting caught up in anything that might be too prescriptive, well, let's come forward around a motion that looks at a tax relief. Is there anything in the act that would prohibit this from being a tax deferral? So could a potential recommendation, if this was supported to go to staff, come back and just say, it's probably not in our best interest to make a tax relief, but similar to that of the seniors program, a tax deferral program might, one, incentivize, and two, help protect some of the interests around heritage, but could actually be recovered funding through the sale of that house or estate at a later date.
Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Kungle, I would have to look at the act specifically before I can answer your question. I'm not 100% sure, so I'd rather get the answer, and I can certainly email all of council tomorrow.
I appreciate that. Still supportive of it and interested to see what staff would even say around recommendations to this. Oh, I've got a nonverbal answer. If I may redirect the question to Mr. Miller, I'm looking at you and my impression is that it's not possible within the act.
It's my understanding it's not possible. This is legislated. I believe this opportunity came through the recent changes and it's as prescriptive in the,
So relief
in the
is the only
report.
option.
That's my
Okay,
understanding.
thank you for that clarification.
Great, thank you, Mayor Nuttall.
Yeah, thanks. And I know you wanted to call the vote. I just want to remind folks that there are a lot of people in our community that do a lot of good for the community that don't get paid for the good that they do for the community. Right? So if somebody's purchased a heritage home and they're bringing it up to snuff and they're preserving that piece of heritage, it's a beautiful thing, right? It's a piece of our history. It's a piece of who we are. But it's no more beautiful than the folks who are going and cleaning the waterfront every summer, every weekend on our behalf, who are going into the forest to make sure that, kids, when they're walking on paths, aren't walking on needles. Or the person who's going to volunteer as a soccer coach or a hockey coach or a lacrosse coach, or the person who walks into Uplift Black and is there as maybe a volunteer to answer the door or to record music or to be a mentor or to be a speaker. Why are we putting this on the pedestal over all of the other good that so many other individuals do in the city? Right? It's when I look at it, I see that heritage is incredibly important, but it's important because of the public good. There's a whole bunch of other public goods that we don't give in individual funding for, right? We give organizational funding. And that's a very, very, very different thing. Anyway.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'm just going to close out. I too have difficulty in supporting this. We've got so many other issues going on around this city that require funding from us. I know people that have owned heritage homes. I know they can be expensive, but also too, when you buy a heritage home, you know what you're getting into. That once you start doing some renovations, it could cost you 10 times what you thought it was going to cost. And that's why personally, I wouldn't take the risk of buying one, even though they are beautiful to look at. But I think it's just very difficult to tell our other taxpayers that we're going to give a certain group some funding to give them tax relief, especially when this same sector already has a grant system in place for doing upgrades to their homes that is through the city. And so that's why I can't support it, that it's just wrong timing for this. Maybe if we're in different economic times and people weren't struggling just to keep a roof over their head, it might be a bit of a different conversation. But in saying that, I will call the vote. Those in favor? And all those opposed? And that fails. And we'll move on to the second item that was held, and that's in regards to public consultations, fireworks restrictions in residential areas. Councillor Congo.
Yes, thank you, Chair Harvey. I'll put the item on the floor and I have an amendment, and that should be before members of committee in hard copy. So I'm just moving back to that agenda item. So with respects to the fireworks restrictions in residential areas, I'm looking to amend it as follows, that it's deleting the motion in its entirety and replacing it with that staff and Access Barrie, in consultation with the Legislative and Court Services Department, conduct public consultations to obtain feedback on the restrictions of fireworks in residential areas, to which up to $5,000 is allocated from the Council's Strategic Priorities Reserve to enable the design of an online and phone poll engagement approach, and whereby staff will report back to the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee with the results. And I can speak to that.
Go ahead, Councillor Schungel.
Thank you. So a couple of pieces, and then if I may ask Ms. James Reed to kind of add any other additional context to the engagement approach. This was, I believe, a commitment we verbalized in the past. We have made restrictions in 2021 specific to amending certain bylaws and pulled back a little bit around the allowance of some of the residential level. From there, this is coming forward because, without speaking on behalf of the other members of council, I do get a lot of outreach through residents across the city, but also different community groups that do have concerns about fireworks in general in residential areas. So the noise, the enforcement challenges, the garbage, and other aspects I think I've shared before and has been captured in the media, but also with respects to the inclusion aspect, which is at this point in time, we allow fireworks on 5 holidays at a residential level. 2 of those are specific, I would say, to cultural holidays. So we've had other groups reach out who have asked about, as a consequence, if you're not named in those permissions, you then, if you do want to have your own fireworks, have to pay for a permit to do so. And so this is getting at an intention to say, before council considers whether or not we want to move any type of amendments to our current bylaws, actually getting some feedback from the public as broadly as possible, so we can actually look at what the public interest is to date, when other municipalities have, since some have fully removed residential, and regardless of it being a bylaw piece, and we've talked about Brampton removing residential, but others have restricted. So this doesn't touch the sale of fireworks. This does not touch whether or not the city continues to do fireworks on its own. But hopefully, I would be interested in making sure that the questions that are framed, and I believe we're looking at about 3 to 5 core questions, may also give us some ideas fitting into our mandate as well at the finance and responsible governance to say, what is the city putting out around our own expenses to host fireworks? There's been changes in technology. Can we leverage drones and light shows? In addition to that, are there other secondary opportunities that align to our strategic directions that might have beneficial environmental impacts? So to that, I've actually put a dollar amount to this, understanding that at this point in time, it's estimated at about $4,500 to do an online and a phone poll. And then the online aspect would also help to inform and clarify for the public before they're asked to give feedback what our current bylaws actually permit, because there might be some misunderstanding about that. And to that, I'd welcome Ms. James Reed to speak at all to, I think, early stages of maybe an engagement plan and how that up to $5,000 has been scoped.
Ms. James Reed.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Harvey, to the committee. Yeah, just to build off what Councillor Kungle said, that's aligned with what we've discussed. What we're proposing to do is to first do a consultation open to anybody on our Building Barrie page, so that anybody can get information on what the current procedure is and to give some feedback on what they would like to see. And we think that that will help in consultation with Ms. Cook's team and us to develop the questions that we would do a random phone poll. And my hope is to do this very quickly. It's kind of perfect that it's all going to get approved tonight, because I think it would be very important for council to get the report back before the spring, because if there are going to be any changes, we'd like to have time to communicate that to the public before Victoria Day. So our hope would be to launch this right away, and you'd see the consultation happening through February, March, and then we'll report back.
Thank you. I've got no further follow-up. I'm happy to hear from other members of committee.
Just 1 second, please. Madam Clerk.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to members of the committee, this motion won't actually be passed until March 6th by City Council because of the delay of the 2 weeks. These minutes will have to go to General Committee on February 28th and then ratified by Council on March 6th.
Thank you for that. So that we would be doing our consultation then later into March, and it'll be quicker. We'll have a less of a time frame open to the public, because I think it is important that you get a report back. Because if you are changing something before Victoria Day, we need to make sure we can give adequate notice for that.
Great, thank you. Anything further, Councillor Kungle?
And Jeff, just if I may, just to clarify, and so there's no misunderstanding. So while I do agree that it would be great to do consultation before Victoria Day, because we know that's the next likelihood, I guess I'd still look to staff to say, if you feel it's too compressed, then making sure the engagement is still a really good engagement, and we can tell the public that there may not be changes before the next holiday. But my assumption would be, if we're paying for it, really good engagement and timeline for engagement first, even though it might overlap into a holiday because of the delay.
Through you, Chair Harvey, I'm confident that we can do a really good job. The cost of this consultation is just for the random poll, which they can turn that around very quickly, and we already have quotes for that. So I'm pretty confident we can make that happen fast. I think the time that we needed is more just for the building Barrie, but depending on what the committee does tonight, I think we'll get a good sense as to whether there's support for this, so we can start the back end to build the site, and we could be ready to go as soon as it's approved by General Committee and Council.
Thank you, Ms. James Reid. I'm good.
Any other members of committee? Any members of non-committee? Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. Ms. James Reid, I just wrote down here what you said, what we were proposing to do. I just want to clarify. Was this initiative staff initiated, whether it be your department or someone else's, or was what we were proposing to do, was that more you answering what you and your departments, like brainstorming after it was raised by council or a member of council?
Thank you for the question. So the item was put forward as an item for discussion from Councillor Kungle, and as our normal process is, the clerk circulates that to staff. And as part of that process, I provided the recommendation that I just articulated and that Councillor Kungle communicated as well.
Perfect. Thank you. I just want to, and the reason I wanted to clarify that is just to make sure that we knew that this wasn't staff initiated. So here, I can't vote on at this committee, but here's why I have an issue with this. What is it exactly we want to find out? And the thing about polls is, and everyone's a counselor here, so you try to get no parking on the street. If you get 50-50, what do you do? If you get 80-20, what do you do? And if you get 20-80, what do you do? So, and I understand that it hasn't been written yet. Like, there's going to be work with staff and the counselor, anybody interested. I understand that. But let's put the questions past that. What do we want to find out? Do people think there's an issue? Do they want to ban all holidays, some holidays? That's a bit of a slippery slope to this, because the feedback, and I'm just gonna call it as it is, the feedback that we got a couple months ago was specifically on Diwali. I am not saying there's no other issues on any other holidays, but I'm going to say what was, and I can play the tape backs of the old meetings as well. That is where a lot of the crux is. As a result of that, online like hatred has increased. So if the poll comes back 90-10, ban it because XYZ does XYZ on what holiday, I don't know what the response would be on that. And the other thing is, and I obviously was going to let the Councillor Kungle go first because she's a member of the committee and I'm not, but I really wanted to hear, because absent a clarification, I don't see anything on the submitted information that there was a conversation had with the Barrie Indian Association, which, by the way, I know Diwali is a Hindu festival, but according to National Geographic, it is India's biggest festival. So or any other stakeholder, did we talk to, if we have a Hindu temple? Pardon my ignorance in Barrie, did we have a conversation with them? And the other one is, did any of us actually, and I say everyone, did any of us actually have a conversation with Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown regarding this? Because they implemented this. And I remember offering to Councillor Kungle, I can give you his direct number, or you can reach out to him on his own, because I know these things are complex. So I don't think we need it. The way it's written, I would not support a poll, period, because I don't know what we're trying to find out. Do we need to address it? Do we need to get stricter with a proactive bylaw enforcement? Maybe. Do we need to, as appropriate, get bylaw to essentially be in the quadrant where complaints tend to happen a lot during Diwali and be ready, like in that area? So it's not a 20-minute response time, it's a 3-minute response time, maybe. But at this point, it's a little bit tough to back this one. And even if we got a poll back, I just want to clarify, and I don't want to use the immigrant card again. I would never vote to ban residential fireworks on Canada Day or Victoria Day, period. Like, I'm speaking for myself. That's just not happening. I think respectful relationships with neighbors, I think education, and I think a couple of fines if needed with bylaw is the way to go on this. And I just don't want to almost open up a can of worms that could get either complicated with data because people feel like they took the time to tell us something and then we ignore them, or it could possibly, I hope it doesn't, but it could get a little bit nasty along some discriminatory lines. So I think maybe, I love the idea about maybe doing some sort of city-sponsored thing for various events and maybe combining it with cracking down with a proactive bylaw enforcement might be a route, but that's not the wording of this. So I wouldn't be supportive if I was a member of the committee.
Great, thank you, Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. And I'll just speak to this generally. It's not a comment or it's not a question back. This wasn't tagged to a particular cultural event or a group or a cultural group of the city on how fireworks is used. This is absolutely not meant to be discriminatory or pointed in one particular direction. It's also why this is something that was going to be done following the 2021, some learnings out of current restrictions, and done last fall. It did not get happened as an engagement process, and we've talked about that. That's fine. I just really want to be clear. This has nothing to do with any type of way in which any cultural group has used fireworks or uses fireworks in celebrations.
Great, thank you, Councillor Hamilton.
I'm not on the committee either, and to be frank, I don't feel strongly one way or another at this point. I haven't had any complaints in this regard, not to say that others have not. I'm new, I've only been here a year and a half, so maybe there was complaints in the past, but just a question for staff. Do we track these complaints? And is it of staff's opinion that this is actually a big item that residents are bringing forward consistently, regularly, and something that probably should be tackled? Or what is staff's sort of perception on this in a priority sense? I know there's lots of complaints of speeding. Is this ranking sort of high up there that we should be investigating this further?
I'll go to Ms. James Reed first and maybe Ms. McAlpine afterwards if needed.
Thank you, through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Hamilton. I did ask staff to run the report from last year on the number of complaints that we had with regards to fireworks and through Service Barrie, and then maybe Wendy or Ms. McAlpine will have something to add. But we had a limited number of complaints that came into Service Barrie. There was 35 in 2023.
Great, thank you. I don't know if any other
Sorry,
staff. Yep, Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Hamilton, Enforcement Services does get a number of complaints, but they're hard to monitor because by the time we get there, the fireworks have stopped, or and it's hard to determine when people are calling with a complaint to determine the exact location where the fireworks are coming from, because they could be blocks away, because fireworks you can see from blocks away. So we do get complaints. A lot of people, like, because of their animals and things like that, but I don't have a specific number that I can provide, but I could provide that to the committee through an email this week.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Chair Harvey. So with a population of 150,000, or what exactly is it, Mayor Nuttall, we've had 35 complaints. Like, to me, that seems quite minimal to be spending any time, effort, and attention to this. Not saying it might be really important to those 35 people. I know I have dogs too, and she struggles with fireworks, so I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm just, again, when we look at the priorities and where we want to spend our time and attention, I'm not sure this warrants it at this time. I would also just wonder, as a follow-up, in terms of more capturing complaints, do we ever get a report back on that in terms of the groupings of where complaints are centralized? And maybe that's a question for later, but I'd love to sort of see that, because maybe that would inform items for discussion going forward and where we're asking staff to spend time on.
Through you, Chair Harvey, we are working on developing that system to be able to report to members of council, and our intent is for this year to be able to give you ward specific and trending information, because I do think that you will find that very interesting as you identified.
Thank you. That's it.
Great, thank you. Councillor Corser.
Hi, through you, Chair Harvey, to I'm gonna toss it out there. I don't know if I'm asking Ms. McAlpine or Ms. Reed. Would these complaints generally come to the City of Barrie, or would they typically historically go to Barrie Police Services? So we might not be getting complaints, but like Barrie Police Services phones could be ringing off the hook, or they could be silent, but we don't know that. Do we?
Ms. McAlpine.
Chair Harvey, through you to Councillor Corser, I think all Service Barrie, Enforcement Services, Barrie Police may all get complaints.
Just a quick follow-up. And I'm just asking maybe for an opinion that might not be fair. I apologize, but just if I should even ask, would it be, well, maybe we could ask Barrie Police Services how many complaints that they receive, so we can have a better understanding of what challenges they have around fireworks complaints. Is that possible? I guess
Through Chair Harvey to Councillor Corser, of course it's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. I can tell you that the councillor in Ward 1 gets an awful lot of complaints about fireworks, not only at Diwali, but also, you know, every at Victoria Day and Canada Day to some extent. Diwali by far the most. And interestingly, having chatted with some of my fellow colleagues around this table, it seems to me that in the southern parts of the city, it's not a big issue. I think in the East End and the North End, it's much more of an issue. And I think that's that to me is just interesting. It doesn't surprise me that Councillor Hamilton says, I don't really get any complaints. Well, come to Ward 1, definitely. And I guess I have a question to staff. Do we have the authority as a city to ban the sale of fireworks in the city itself?
Ms. James Reed, or whoever could answer that.
There's
Councillor Harvey, through you to Councillor Riepma, certainly the municipality could pass a bylaw prohibiting the sale of fireworks within the boundaries. However, that would not stop individuals from purchasing fireworks online or across the boundary line and bringing them into the community.
Yeah. Yes, I'm fully aware of that. Now, I don't really know whether if we didn't allow the sale of fireworks in the city, whether that would have any material effect either. So it's just something that I wonder about. I think that I'm not a member of the committees, but I would, if I was sitting there, I think I would support this. And the reason for that is that I think that the more information we have, the better. And I also think that it's going, the real difficulty with any bylaw is enforcement. And I think certainly a fireworks bylaw, the enforcement is the real problem. We could pass a bylaw that does whatever, makes whatever rules, but making that stick is going to be the challenge. And so I'm really interested in seeing if we can get some kind of community response that would give us some ideas as to how we might do that. And it might be education, but maybe it's the city has a role in it somehow, that we could do something for various cultural groups and do it as a city sponsored event, and maybe that would reduce some of the issue. So.
And since he's on committee, I'll go to Deputy Mayor Thompson next.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. Through you to Councillor Kungle, just to help with the question about police, unless the fireworks being used as a weapon, it's a bylaw offense. So they may field it, but I doubt they would have a number because it's not something they would attend. Maybe as a noise bylaw, but I don't know if that'll give you a true number. So just giving you some clarity.
And I'll go to Councillor Nixon next, and then Mayor Nuttall.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. Yeah, I just want to jump in and concur with Councillor Riepma. I hear the number of 35 calls coming into Service Barrie and enforcement. I'm positive I got more than 35 myself over, when you add up the 5 different events, and I'm sure that anyone in certain parts of the city got the same. It's a bigger issue, obviously, in the north end and the northeast end, as well as the thousands of people that live on Lakeshore and the condos. So yeah, it's definitely an issue. I think that we need to learn more about it. I think we need to get some kind of feel what the rest of the city population, I don't know how many people will respond, but it'll give us something to go by, so that we can talk about it at a later date. And I think something has to be done. But until we have more information, it's hard to come up with any decision. So I certainly support the idea of doing a poll. It all comes down to how the questions are worded. And hopefully it's a big response so that it allows all of us to make better decisions at that point. So thank you.
Mayor Nuttall.
Yeah, I think that there's a few things, and I had a good conversation with Councillor Kungle before. I also spoke with Councillor Morales before this tonight. As our CAO once said to me, you can't legislate stupid. And it doesn't matter what culture we're talking about, whether it's July 1st or it's Christmas Eve or if it's Diwali or if it's Eid or if it's like, we can keep going on and on and on. There's going to be somebody going out at 1 a.m. setting off some fireworks. And, you know, my experience in the North End, to be just frank, is it didn't wake me up, but it woke my daughter up, and that woke me up because she's crying in bed, wondering like, is somebody getting shot out front of the house or something, you know? And that's not a great way to wake up on a school night and before a spelling test, because that's what it was for us. So I think that there's issues related to fireworks. There's no question. Like, there just isn't a question about it in terms of you know, the use of them. But the question is actually about individuals in the community having respect for other individuals in the community. And you know, I think that asking questions is always good. You know, I share Councillor Morales's point on what is it we're trying to figure out. So I'd like, between these meetings, I'd like to figure that out. Like, what are the questions that we're trying to answer? Is this a, hey, which way is the wind going? I'm going to go that way. Then that's fine. Or is it, we're trying to drill down into what the public, you know, views private fireworks versus public fireworks? Is it, should we have no fireworks? Like, really drilling down into the where people are at. And one of the questions I would like to ask the public is, do you think that the city could enforce no fireworks? Like, do the people who are saying, I don't want any fireworks, believe that, you know, our team here has enough staff on the road to stop fireworks from happening? Because I think that it would be an interesting result if that was one of the questions asked. Because in the conversation I've had with Mayor Brown is that I said to him, what effect is it has? Well, none. The answer is none. And so the result that we're trying to achieve here through asking the public for information, I think we need to really determine what it is we're asking for. So I'm going to support it tonight to be able to deal with it at the end of the month. And I'd like to drill down on what it is that we're asking that will then inform our action as a team. The final piece I just want to throw out there is, you know, saying no sales in Barrie. I bought my last set of fireworks at the corner of Hanmer and Bayfield Street. It is the final piece of property inside the city of Barrie. If they walked 50 meters to the north of where they're, I don't know what you call portable or whatever it was that they were selling them out of, if they, you know, lifted it and moved it 50 meters, they could sell those things. And so, you know, I don't really believe that that works either. And the worst part, I think, of that is that it's actually part of a fundraising campaign for the Kiwanis Club. And they raise quite a bit of money, as I understand, through the firework program, and give quite a bit of money through their fireworks that they sell. And so I would want them to be part of any consultation that happens coming out of the city, to understand the ramifications of our decision on whatever programs helping those who are less fortunate that they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris.
Yeah, I wasn't going to weigh in, but it's just become such a great discussion. I had to jump in. I'm just curious. I'm more concerned about the methodology and, you know, engagement's great, but when you engage and you don't respond to the engagement, then you've got yourself a problem. Just wondering through you, Chair Harvey, to Ms. James Reed, we do engagement with our budget every year, and I know the returns aren't spectacular. What do you expect the return would be on this to actually be a measurable, usable representation of our population?
Ms. James Reed.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Harris, what we were proposing to do, and it maybe the discussion has kind of changed that slightly based on the mayor's comments. What we were proposing to do is use our Building Barrie platform, which is on our website, and that's when we do all our consultations there, was to just kind of get feedback from the community. What do they like to see? What are they thinking? What, you know, we've done a preliminary analysis of other municipalities, and there is a trend, which is only to allow it on Victoria Day and July 1st. But we were going to kind of just like feel out the community to get some feedback. And then we were going to do a random sample, a statistically valid phone poll of 1,000 people, which is our sort of standard for our size community. Perhaps that might evolve a little bit based on the conversation, and maybe as we come back to the March 6th date, we could do a memo to council and kind of give you some ideas of what we were thinking in terms of questions. But we were actually anticipating the community kind of giving us some feedback through that Building Barrie platform, which would then drive the questions that we would ask through the random poll.
Okay, that really helps. It's a random phone, 1,000 calls. Is there a point of number of return calls that would make it valid? Because it's a small number, 1,000, but what would you hope for return?
Yes, so as part of that, it's the same thing we did for the one part of the consultation on the budget. They keep calling until they get 1,000 people who answer the survey.
Okay, great. I mean, I'm not on the committee, so I'll reserve my comment. I just think the data is important to have. I don't know, again, on the number of complaints. We haven't had the detail provided to us around what the police's role, if any, is in this. So I just, you know, what problem are we trying to solve? Will the remedy that comes forward be even remotely able to address the problem that is being proposed, which I'm not exactly clear on. So good luck to the committee, and hopefully we have something to move forward with.
Great, thank you. I'm going to just weigh in for a quick few questions, and hopefully we can call the vote. I wasn't opposed to the original motion. The amendment I struggle with because now it's got some dollar values attached to it. And I'm thinking back to when we did the phone poll right across the entire city at the beginning of the pandemic to provide information that went to every telephone number that was available. And it, off the top of my head, it didn't cost $5,000. So I'm just kind of curious, if we're only doing 1,000 calls now, how did we end up, like, how's this budget broken down to total $5,000?
Thank you for the question. I would have to go back and look at, I recall that, although it feels like a lifetime ago, to find out the exact cost of that. But in my recollection of it, it was an automatic phone, like a voicemail that went to every household. And so it just said, here's what you do to keep safe. Here's our information. Here's like where to go. It wasn't waiting. It wasn't a live interactive where we're asking for people to answer questions. So I think that's the differential. The $4,500 is pretty standard for 1,000 phone, like a random phone like that. We've done the quotes, and that's the dollar value that we used for the budget consultation as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll support it in principle now. Hopefully we get some more information before this thing comes forward to general committee, and then I can make some better decisions coming forward. Because I'll be quite honest with you, as someone that's lived and breathed the law enforcement side for 35 years, this is almost impossible to enforce. And Deputy Mayor Thompson was spot on when he said the police are not going to be able to tell you how many complaints that came in, because the CAD system doesn't have an I-type for fireworks. It'll get lumped in with noise complaints. So that they'd literally have to go one by one checking all the calls, which would be extremely time consuming. Now, depending on how their CAD is, you can do word searches, so they might be able to find the word firework and however many calls that have come in. But the reality of it is it's still brutally difficult to enforce. We've seen it firsthand in Brampton, but I will in principle support it tonight, but I do very much struggle with the fact that we're really going to be getting any valuable information that is actually going to make a difference in this. And to start targeting certain holidays, I think is a pretty slippery slope for any of us to be going down. Because the reality of it is our demographics here in the city of Barrie have dramatically changed, and we have to change with it. And we can't just say that you can only do fireworks on Canada Day and Victoria Day and different things, because I think we'd be getting far more complaints then than what we're getting now. Because myself, I think I've had 1 or 2 calls or emails about fireworks in the 5 years I've been on council. And yes, I have been woken up at 1 o'clock in the morning when one guy a street over was popping them off because of whatever reason, because it wasn't even any of the holidays. But with that being said, I will call the vote. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Now, to try to keep us moving here, because we're at 7:08 already, our next item that was held is support for nonprofit environmental groups, and that was held by Mayor Nuttall.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I have a few issues with this. First of all, I want to go back to the budget. I didn't make any amendments to the budget on the conservation authorities, keeping in mind that we had somebody who was just being approved as incoming chair, and we have another member, and both of you had budget requests that were above and beyond the required legislated work that needs to be done on behalf of the city of Barrie with each of those conservation authorities. But I also want to outline that, you know, as I've said publicly, we have said privately with the chair and certainly with the councillor who's written it. You know, my goal is by the end of this year to have a conservation trust set up for our land, for our you know, to preserve our ecological heritage in this area, to make sure that you know, the 3 areas that I really want to focus on: Bear Creek wetlands, Little Lake, and the Hewitt's Creek corridor, which had a lot more preserved than the Lovers Creek corridor in the past. To make sure that those lands are set aside and that we have a budget to be able to give in order for work to be done in terms of, you know, developing trail systems or plantings or whatever it is that needs to be done in those spaces. And in the Little Lake side, it's a lot more than that because there's a master plan that's already been looked at, needs to be updated. So to then say, okay, well, we're going to go and we're going to actually pick, and this is where I'm against altogether. We're going to pick some organizations and say, let's get a community grant program for them, but not really have the control over what the prioritization would be for those organizations. I think this is actually in my world, in my mind, and I might not be on the majority here. This is going in front of what, as a priority, I think the city will have when we get this conservation trust set up. These dollars should go into said conservation trust, and those conservation trusts should work with all of these organizations. But there's got to be some focus and there's got to be some prioritization taking place on this before we go out and do something like this. And the other item I think that's really important when we're considering all of these things is that the idea of a conservation trust will allow for fundraising inside of the community, so that it's not just our, you know, city residential and commercial industrial taxpayers that are footing the bill, but there's also the opportunity for others to donate and therefore that have influence over what the outcomes are. So for me, I don't, it's not that I don't support something like this. I don't support it in the way that it's being presented, and I don't support it in advance of laying out our vision for the future on conservation and care of these ecological assets going forward.
Great, thank you. Any other members of committee? Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. And so I kind of read it as completely separate from that. And maybe I'll just speak to that because I don't disagree that those are exciting things. And I'm really happy to hear that our focus is on, some core natural spaces that we have intentions to protect. I looked at it more around past conversations by which we've done a really nice job at putting art grants and art funding aside where art groups can come forward. We've done a really great job at putting, I believe, a $300,000 sport and rec grant forward. But where I have seen individuals come forward to ask, they're kind of left to make deputations. And then the process isn't the same as others that qualify based on how they can fit themselves into certain grants. So we've seen, as an example, Living Green has a broader mandate than just the tree planting, right? From a circular economy, from a landfill redirection, treading lightly, things that tie into things like active transportation sustainability. But we don't seem to have maybe a global net that allows anyone, especially not-for-profits, to opt in. Some of our not-for-profits and groups don't really have a grant that we have that they qualify for. So for me, I was looking at this to say, maybe it's the framing, but how are we maybe re-looking at the grants we offer and who's excluded? And how are we accommodating those not-for-profits around either saying, well, maybe we need to open things up if it aligns to our strategic priorities around certain aspects tied to environment and climate action. Is that different than land trusts and conservation aspects that are really for particular areas? But the work that we've talked about, really great not-for-profits are doing, and we've seen Clean Up Barrie come with a presentation about what they're doing, but that falls outside of really specific, I would say, environmental areas, and it's happening across the city. So for me, it's looking at how have we made sure that from an equity standpoint, we haven't created grants that are actually restrictive to other not-for-profits.
Mayor Nuttall.
Yeah, I guess then what you're saying is create a not-for-profit grant and any not-for-profit in the community can apply. Right? So then churches will be coming and asking for money and so on and so on and so forth. There were specified grants that are for recreation. There's one, I think, in the middle of this month, Ms. McAlpine, the Brighter Futures that I believe there's intergovernmental cooperation on that are targeted. The public arts are targeted, right? So we think about the murals downtown, all of those items. What this is saying is it's saying establish a funding program for the environmental not-for-profit groups. I don't see anything that says what they're going to do. I don't see anything that says the priority. I don't see anything that says anything except for provide funding. And so I think when we're going to provide funding in the community, if we're not going to say what we want it to be focused on, there's no way we're going to measure its success. And therefore it's becoming, it's just a handout instead of a focused approach to what we're trying to achieve as a community. And so I just think this is it's either too broad if you're saying that it has nothing to do with conservation and cleanup of public spaces that we define as very important to the city, or it needs to wait until we get there on that point. But for me, I just can't support it. It's like, hey, here's some money. Like, let's just get another bunch of find 10 other things that we really think are good for the community and just start pushing money out the door with no measurables of success for those dollars.
Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. A little bit of a comment. I will not be supporting this. And for members of last term, the new ones, this was established due to the increase of groups coming forward with no structure and no real path. It was you had to have somebody on the know, somebody on the in, but new members of council had no idea where they got funding from. And it was actually the work of Councillor Jim Harris that stopped, and I don't want to use the word slush fund, but it was a fund that was coming out of the electorate dividends for groups. If you had an insider who brought you in front of council, but new members of council had no idea. So it was actually Councillor Jim Harris who sat down with CAO Prouse, and they worked out a framework to create the recreation, which has, you know, a matrix, a guideline, measurables that's actually worked out and minimized, because we know every year what it's set out to do. And I think that this is so vague, but right now we have so many priorities. Creating other grant funding is not the time. So I will not be supporting this at this time. Now, if down the road it's to look at all our grant funding and start merging some with the opportunity for non-for-profits, or, you know, casting a larger net, then I might be open for that. But at this time, I'm not. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Corser.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. I look at this and I just flash back to the presentation that Clean Up Barrie provided us just recently. And as an organization that cleans up our parks environment through volunteer members and basically saves the city money for not having to put the manpower out there to do it ourselves. They take a great burden off of the city, and if they thought that they're not able to apply for a grant, like somebody like a sports league or an art project, it doesn't make sense to me that there isn't a category that a group like that would be able to fall into, that they're exclusionary, including Nature Barrie, including like all the groups that like environmentally protective groups that look after things in our parks and our places that we do not have the manpower or the budget to cover. So I think that when I read it, I thought this isn't for a free for all to, like, you know, start tossing coins out. The request was for staff to go back and investigate the parameters of how something like this, maybe to compare it to other municipalities or whatever that is in their process of writing these reports and doing their investigations, come back with a framework for what would be acceptable for us to then discuss at a later date after a staff report comes forward. So I don't find this loosey-goosey. I find this that staff is kind of given the instruction to go back and take a look at how they can tighten it up and make it much more the framework much tighter on it. So that was how I read it. And I just wanted to make that comment, I guess. There's just no question. That's just where I read it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Kungle and then Mayor Nuttall.
Thank you. I mean, it's good. It's good discussion. And for me, I'm stepping away from like different opinions about what is and isn't involved in this and throwing more money at it. But really, to me, it raises the question, and I think we've skirted around it a fair bit, and we've seen different groups come to the table because they don't fit in the grants, and we continue to invest in community. And I think it's wonderful that we put grant money out there. But when was the last time we looked at that and heard from groups that have said, I don't fit in to your requirements? So why is it perceived that we perhaps are favoring or prioritizing access to grant funding for certain groups, but not all who do great work in the city? So inherently, I think when we have different grants that have pieces that tie to certain groups, we leave people out. So where do we be clear to say, if we've got certain grants, who's permitted into those grants, who inherently by criteria is left out of that? And when was the last time we looked at that and considered whether or not these grants need to shift in size or weight or access?
Great, thank you, Mayor Nuttall.
Through yourself, Mr. Chair, probably the CEO. Mr. CEO, is there a organization in the community that the City of Barrie funds that then redirects money to sports? Okay, so I'll ask the next question. Since you can't think of one, I'm guessing it's not there. Is there a similar organization that the City of Barrie funds when it comes to arts? And then the funds are then dispersed from this entity to the community? Do we have any service partners for the arts?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Mayor Nuttall, I'm not sure I would describe them as service partners, but we do have a cultural grant program, which is adjudicated by what I'll describe as a third-party panel.
Which is inside the city though, right? It's part of the city. It's one of our committees, right?
An independent committee, I would say, but yes.
Yes. Okay. Do we have a conservation and environmental service partner in the community?
The speed round is not doing well for me, Mayor Nuttall. I hesitate to answer only because I'll leave somebody out and I'll get an angry email tomorrow that says, we've been here for 25 years and you forgot about it. Not top of my mind, Mayor Nuttall.
Okay. What would you define our relationships with the conservation authorities as?
They are indeed service partners who are paid by the City of Barrie to provide services in and around environmental stewardship and guidance.
Okay.
And planning.
So I'm now going to take my questions to the two members, and look, I'm putting you on the spot and I'm putting you on the spot. So we haven't talked about this in advance. What are the sizes of your budgets?
Good question. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. And what's the size of your budget?
I wouldn't be able to give you
Okay,
that number off the top of my
perfect.
head, even though we actually just talked about this last week. But yeah, I'm gonna take a wild guess. I don't even think it was 30, to be quite honest with you. I don't know if Madam Clerk has those numbers off her. No,
No,
the
the
Conservation
Conservation
Authority
Authorities.
budgets. Yeah, like I'll be quite honest with you. I wouldn't even want to try and give you a hard number.
Well, it's last week and I can't remember what the requests were from the conservation authorities in budget amount. But I believe it's over $1 million. It's in the millions of dollars that we send to the conservation authorities. Is that roundabout right?
I'm gonna say yes. If you give me a couple of minutes, I'll look it up, but it's in
I
the
don't think we
ballpark.
need the exact. My point is this, that there are millions and millions and millions of dollars that we put into conservation, into environmentalism, into cleanup in this community. And we trust the conservation authorities to act on our behalf in those places. And those conservation authorities, if they went and looked, they would find that they have third parties that they partner up with in the community to deliver the services that are required. So the fact that the City of Barrie doesn't have its own program related to this right now for grants and for partnerships and for funding is kind of makes sense because we fund it already through other organizations. And I think that that's the difference for me when I'm looking at recreation or arts versus environmentalism and conservation. And I'm actually speaking out both sides of my mouth now. I'll be honest about that because I'm asking us to eventually put together a conservation trust, which is above and beyond that, because I think it needs to be controlled in the City of Barrie. I don't think we're organizationally there yet.
Yeah, and just to follow up to your point, I can talk from the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation's side of things. When it comes to the different categories that outside of category 1, which are the legislative core responsibilities of the Conservation Authority, we also pay an additional fee of almost $50,000 this past year for those category 3, which involve things like stewardship and different things. And so Mayor Nuttall is spot on that this is something that we're actually already paying for, and it's built into the Conservation Authority's budgets. I'm going to first go to Councillor Morales and then Councillor Rietma.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. I wrote down a couple of points here. The difference between this, because it's been brought up a bit before, the difference between this potential initiative and the sports grant program, whatever the name is that program, the sports grant that we have, that is a grant program that we have in order to fund initiatives of services we don't do. Very clear. When there are great programs out there in the community that we don't offer, unique things, they can apply to that program because those programs augment the city offerings. And so we have a process to support those initiatives. Why am I clarifying that? Because there was a bit of there's something for sports and arts. Why don't we do this? We haven't yet been in the business of having rec leagues for low income, marginalized and racial communities. So we've supported them through a proper process. We've supported them in the past because we don't offer that yet. So that is very clear because I just want, if people are watching, that is a very clear differentiation. There's no preferences being given here. Number two, the point about what this is about and not about, because I heard like this could be perceived as being exclusionary or an equity issue if we don't have this because other things have them. This is not about exclusion or equity. I'm a little bit perplexed as to how it could be perceived that way. It's in the very name of it. It's a grant. And the definition of a grant is no one is entitled to a grant. A grant is something you apply for and you either get rejected or not. So it's kind of like saying, why didn't I get a subsidy? Well, it's called a subsidy. It's not called payment. It's not called an invoice, right? So a grant by definition, no one can be entitled to, which supports a bit of point one. And these are very important words in my opinion, which is why I'm taking this time to clarify, because these issues get heated. They got one, we didn't get one, which it's not about exclusivity or equity. It's about what City Hall prioritizes, which leads me to my final point. If I was on the committee, I would not be supportive of this out of pure respect for you, Mayor Nuttall, because you have started to prioritize things of this nature with the Conservation Trust Initiative. And it hasn't been prioritized before. And as a result, I am going to give you the runway to take it to that next level. If there are initiatives in your program that you're leading, the city's program, that still leave gaps, maybe we have a conversation then on how to augment those gaps. But it is, for me, I'm speaking for myself only, would be horrible timing that I've been on council for 9 years and I'm going to vote in favor of an initiative right when you bring an entire conservation trust initiative that is aimed to address some of these factors. So this is not about equity and exclusion or potentially perceived. Nobody said it, but it's not about them or that. It's about, we have a process for organizations that have unique offerings that augment what we offer, what the city already offers. And the mayor is leading the charge, I'm sure with many people, on an initiative that's going to address this thing that hasn't been addressed before. So when you have the proper runway and you have the proper time to see what is it going to focus on and where gaps may be, then maybe we have a conversation about this. So if I was on the committee, I wouldn't support this.
I'm going to close out with Councillor Rietma, and then I'm going to call the vote only because we've been on this for, again, 30 minutes. And I think we've still got one more item on the agenda, and we're going to be an hour or so late before we actually get council going. And I think all of us have got the gist about what we're dealing with here. So Councillor Rietma.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. And I'll be quick. Mr. Mayor, I'm very supportive of your conservation trust, and I think that's something that this city really needs to do. This has nothing to do with this proposal. We have here in the city a very robust program for funding or assisting groups with funding for the arts. All kinds of things, dance and theater and all those kinds of things. We have a very robust program for evaluating who gets and how much. We have the same thing for sports. Again, it's a very robust program that is run by our staff. I think for the arts, we give out something like $230,000 a year. For the sports, it's around $300,000 a year. And this is written very specifically for staff to investigate the feasibility of establishing a funding program similar to those two programs that we have, orientated towards the environment. And the reason for that is that the Conservation Authority doesn't pick up garbage. We have all kinds of groups in this city who pick up garbage, go after removing invasive species, all kinds of other things. And what I'm proposing with this is to ask staff to develop a program whereby these groups can get a bit of money, because these are all volunteers. If we can just give them a little bit of money as a catalyst and then get out of the way, let them go to work. I think we've seen a lot of success in our arts programs and in our sports programs. And this is a way to get a lot of work done for very little money. And I think that's what's behind this, and that's why I'm asking the committee to support it.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to close out and then I'll call the vote. I struggle in supporting this for a few reasons, and tonight's a prime example. The only item that actually passed on consent was Councillor Nixon's, where he's doing exactly that. We have ward budgets that this criteria actually fits in. He's buying some capital piece for another organization in his ward that goes around and cleans up the streets. And kudos to him for doing that. And all of us have that ability within our budgets. And I know the clerk sent out the chart that indicates of the two budgets what you can and cannot use those budgets for. So I think realistically, if people feel that strong about this, that's the direction that they should be going with this. And then these other organizations, there's provincial, federal grants and different things. I used to sit on a provincial not-for-profit, and every year you were just hoping that you got that provincial funding, or else you had to start struggling and finding some fundraising. And I haphazard to say that all these people are volunteers. And the reason I say that is because the deputant that stood before us actually spoke about giving those volunteers gift cards. Well, now all of a sudden you're basically paying people $25 an hour or whatever it worked out to with these gift cards to volunteer their time and pick up garbage. And then the other issue I have with this is if we're going to start supporting one sector, the not-for-profit sector, well, it puts us into that position. You now have to start supporting them all. And this just opens up a Pandora's box and potentially sets a bad precedence to us having to support everybody. And we just don't have the funding. And I'll be quite honest with you, I don't know that it's a municipality's responsibility to have to fund all of the not-for-profits within the city. And that's why we have the higher levels of government for that. So I too, at this point, will not support this. And at that, I will call the vote. All those in favor and opposed? And that fails. And we'll move on to the last item, which is 8.1, Saddle and Arena expansion, and that was held by Mayor Nuttall.
Yeah, sorry, I appreciate it. And I'm not looking to change what's written here, but what I am looking to do is to give some direction with relation to the mat. So in it, the verbiage basically says be increased by 2% effective April 1st, and that the increased percentage be directed to a future expansion of the Saddle Arena. And the staff in the finance department directed to create a Saddle Arena expansion reserve for the funds. I don't really have an issue with what's written. I actually have the councillor, Mr. Chair, and myself met with the Tourism Barrie folks, and in that conversation, and you do a lot of good work on this subject already, but in the conversation was when you increase the mat, there's a corresponding increase to Tourism Barrie, and because we only have 50%, I think there is going to be a contribution on the other side as well, but it's not covered in this. So rather than me trying to create a number off the spot out of my head, because I'm reaching back on my memory to places that aren't working, I would just like some direction to staff to come back with what the corresponding number is on the other side, and that be included inside of the reserve itself. I don't want to be going looking for something later on that's not there. I'd rather collect when it's collected. And that's not a shot at anyone else. It's how I would treat any organization inside the city of Barrie that's doing business with the city of Barrie. So is an amendment required, or is that just okay to figure that out, come back with information?
CAO Press. Or anyone else that wants to take a stab at that?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to the mayor, and maybe on behalf of Ms. Schlichter, Mayor Nuttall, a little more clarity might be helpful. I'm not sure we require an amendment, but I'm not sure of the intent. Ms. Schlichter may be able to shed some light on it. I believe the requirement is that any funds raised through the MAT are shared 50-50 with Tourism Barrie effectively. So increasing the MAT by 2% would increase the city's revenue by 1%. And 1% would go back to Tourism Barrie. Is it your intent that Tourism Barrie set up a reserve as part of a contribution?
It is my intent that they contribute to our reserve.
So I can chime in as the representative on Tourism Barrie. That is the intent around this, and so the reason it's not in the motion is obviously, as the CAO just spoke about, the legislative requirement to have a minimum of a 50-50 split with a local tourism bureau. As a result, I don't see how legally we could actually force them to do that. However, the discussions that we've had with Tourism Barrie to date have said exactly that. And that all of this additional funding for the 2% is to be sport tourism based. I can get into the specific numbers, but when it comes to your specific inquiry, that's my rationale as to why the motion is worded the way that it is. But yes, the intent is exactly what you've just requested.
If I may, Chair Harvey, as a follow-up to that, given that additional information, I think the clerk would probably indicate it would be helpful if an actual amendment was introduced requesting Tourism Barrie to do exactly what you've outlined, because we won't be able to give them that direction. So if the expectation is that they contribute to our reserve, then we should probably be clear with that here tonight.
Sorry, motion's on the floor because I forgot to do that again. And I'm going to move an amendment that I'm going to take as friendly, that so the staff in the finance department created blah, blah, blah. And then at number 3, that an agreement be established between the City of Barrie and Tourism Barrie to determine the contributions from Tourism Barrie to the expansion reserve on an annual basis, and the results of those negotiations be reported back.
Madam Clerk, were you able to capture that?
No.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, can I just add? Can I just
Mr.
add?
Miller, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Harvey. Sorry, I'd just like to add quickly. So the rules are fairly prescribed. It's 50-50 split, and as discussed, if the Tourism Barrie Board decided they could pay us the 1% back to the city as they do collect, there is a bylaw as well that we'll have to update, and we do have an agreement with them already, but the onus would be really on the Tourism Barrie Board to agree to it. And I think the motion would be fine if there was another motion from the board that articulated it, and we're good.
Great, thank you. Anybody around the table, members of committee with any comments? Non-members, go ahead, Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. I don't enjoy catching these little things or just being overly safe, but like the one when I brought up the public space in the fairgrounds land, but the wording of that the MAT be increased by 2% effective April 1st. I don't have designation CPA after my name, but by 2% is usually in reference to an existing number. So if that number is 2%, just very quickly, so I don't get the number wrong, what is the current MAT right now? Percentage?
So just to clarify, I know exactly what you're trying to ask. So it's based on the dollar value of the room rates sold. So to give you an idea, for 2023, it was just shy of $34 million was the overall room charges across the city. And then obviously there's that 4% MAT that would be on that. So what this is proposing is to increase it from the 4% to the 6%, and that additional 2% on both sides would go directly to sport tourism, with this other reserve being created for the expansion of the Saddlin Arena.
Okay, perfect. Even just having your answer on the record in a public YouTube video is good. Again, because you know where I was going, 2% of 4% is a very small number. And that is the literal definition. Again, don't have the letter CPA behind my name, but especially when it comes to numbers like this, I just want to know that it's communicated, even if it doesn't need to be rewritten. Otherwise, I'm in support if I could vote on this.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to chime in and maybe give a little bit of color to this quickly, and then we'll go to yourself, Councillor Corser. So in 2023, we ended up seeing 650,000 people staying in Barrie hotels, and about 25% of that is accounted through sport tourism. So overall, sport tourism is starting to take over, and what the hoteliers are seeing is a decrease when it comes to the business stays. And that's why, from a tourism perspective, obviously it's in their best interest to start pivoting, so that way they're making up for the differences. And through that, obviously, the tournaments are the ones that are the big drivers of this, because sometimes it's not even tournaments that are even in Barrie. Sometimes when some of our bordering areas don't have enough hotels, it creates a spill off into our area. So that's the rationale behind this. And using the current 2023 numbers, they're not expecting massive jumps. So these numbers are actually quite conservative from what I can see. In 2024, they expect that the additional 2% would bring in another just shy of 598,000, and that in 2025 it would bring in 762,000. Like, I mean, it's not mass numbers when you consider what the cost of this expansion could be. And like, I mean, kudos to Councillor Harris, who beat me to the race and has his 2.5 million going into the theater every year to that reserve. But this is to get us moving forward. And this is actually following what a lot of other municipalities have started to do. And like, I mean, Vancouver is actually funding their entire costing of FIFA over about a 10-year period by doing this. And they've actually gone to 6.5. And I'm sure now that a few have started to do it, you're going to see a lot more moving this way too. So we're just kind of at the beginning of the curve of this. And the reason it's starting in April is it takes about 60 days for things to catch up. And obviously we want to make sure that this is in place for the summer rush, when obviously the hotel capacities are a lot higher than what they probably are today, because unfortunately we haven't seen too much snow. So there's not too many people coming for a ski vacation in Simcoe County right now, unfortunately, even though if you go to the ski hills, there's actually quite a lot of snow. It's just when you look around, there's not too much to deal with. But those are my comments, and I'll go to Councillor Corser.
Okay, so I guess this goes to the chair and the mover, the sponsor of the item for discussion. So just for clarification, you're asking for more money to put money into reserve for future, to support a future capital project, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Councillor Harris.
I'll be real fast, and thank you for the shout out about the theater reserve. I think I support this. I think this is an asset that's approaching 30 years old. I think it needs to be invested in, and I know when it was built, it was state of the art, but it has time has caught up with it as far as other facilities across its primary function as an OHL franchise facility. So, and as a city asset, I think it's really important that it be invested in, and putting the money aside proactively and purposefully makes a lot of sense. So like the theater reserve, we're building up some funds to be able to do this and not just have this big number at the end and be shocked by it. So I think it's a great idea. So hoping the committee members support it.
Great, thank you. Any other members of committee or non-committee? Councillor Nixon.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair Harvey. Further to Councillor Morales's comments, it got me looking at this number and should that not be worded increased to 6% as opposed to increased by 4%? Because increasing 4%, it's more than go from 4 to 6 is more than 2%. You know what I'm saying? It's how it's worded. If everybody understands where I'm coming with this, Councillor Hamilton's agreeing. So I'm just thinking that for clarity, if we're taking it from 4 to 6, maybe that's what it should say. And because percentages are deceiving, you know?
So the reason it's worded the way it is it's amending a current bylaw. But I will let Madam Clerk give you much more clarity than that.
Okay.
Because we did work together to bring up this wording.
Okay.
Through you, Chair Harvey, if you wanted to put like a further slight wording amendment, you could be in the first paragraph saying that the MAT tax be increased from 4% to 6%. And if that provides the clarity that the members need, that would essentially do the same thing, but provide the clarity that Councillor Nixon's looking for, which he can't put in an amendment because he's not a member of the committee.
Okay. Well, all right. Okay. Mm.
To appease the concern, I will put an amendment there that it read to change it from 4 to 6%, even though I think it's pretty clear myself, but if
Mr. Chair, I don't think you can.
Oh, that's right too. Actually, as a chair, I can't do that. Sorry for that. I don't know if you want to do that, Mayor Nuttall?
Yeah, the municipal accommodation tax be increased from 4% to 6% effective April 1st, 2024. We'll just add that into the initial one as a friendly to myself.
Whole lot of friendliness going on tonight.
I have lots of friends if I'm the only one in the room.
I gather you captured that, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Chair Harvey.
Great, thank you. Is there any other comments around the table? No? I will then call the vote. All those in favor on the amended motion? And that carries unanimously. And that finally concludes our Finance and Responsible Governance Committee at 7:50 p.m. This meeting will be adjourned, and I guess, what do you want, 10 minutes?
Yeah, 8 p.m. we'll start.
And council will then start at 8, or I guess general committee will start at 8 p.m.